So this was kind of our approach at it. So, using minimal viable product, build, test, learn. We would, as we got feedback, because when you get feedback, you can pivot. If you don't have feedback, you can't pivot. Oh, you can. You can have and I've seen this happen, we have the founder come in every couple of weeks and have a new idea, and everybody pivots based on the founder's new idea, right? That's very frustrating. Our Kanban was basically, we first started with the stickies, and then we got to where it was just really the whiteboard running our designs up there. Now, we had lots of other kinds of documentation, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then small batches, going out all the time. And I'll talk about how this in a minute, how this ties back into, to Agile. So I want to talk about 3 key principles, though, and this is, as we went through this project, and we, and in fact, I just, yesterday, in front of all of our directors and above throughout eBay is like 30, our whole corporation is like 30-something thousand people, and there's like 1,500 directors and VPs and above, right? So for that whole crowd, I gave a demo with my head of product for the checkout to show the new experience, because a lot of folks at eBay haven't seen it, and we got like a huge, applause, almost like a standing ovation, because it was so radically different than what had been done in PayPal before. And but it certainly wasn't my genius. It wasn't even my team's genius. It was the collective wisdom of our customers coming in and doing that made us all, much smarter, which is really, I think, to me, more exciting than the actual, anybody who had some great idea. Because you don't even know who had the idea. At some point, you don't even care anymore. It's just really about getting a good experience out. But then, as we wrapped up this, not wrapped up, this project keeps going, but as we got that project on good footing and got the people all have the DNA, and they're like, now they wouldn't do anything any different way. Well, the next project wants to start up, it's doing reinventing merchant experience. When you're a merchant, what's your experience when you want to check your inventory, when you want to check your reports, and all sort of things like that. And our merchant experience has absolutely sucked. And we have more merchants than anybody, and we have more developers than anybody, and our developer experience has absolutely sucked. That's why we're reinventing all these experiences. But, I could see right away, because what I'd seen and this afternoon I'll talk about the anti-patterns, but what I'd seen on this project, the Checkout project, was that it's really easy to fall back into bad patterns and not operate the right way. So with the other ones, I needed to be able to start communicating them, how do they actually work in the right way? So 3 principles kind of came out to me, learnings, and I like to drive by principles more than process, because principles will drive process and everything else. And so the first one is a shared understanding. And the reason I have Star Trek up here is because if the perfect shared understanding would be a Vulcan mind meld, right? If you could do a Vulcan mind meld with your partners, you may not want to, but if you could, and be able to and our customers come in and do that Vulcan mind meld with us, maybe we'd have the perfect kind of shared understanding. But shared understanding is so important because that's really what we're trying to get to as we build a product. With product design, engineering, risk, whoever else, marketing, whatever, your different functions are. If everybody really understands what we're trying to do and has a shared vocabulary, then the project goes a lot faster. But all those impedance mismatches that happen between our understanding with each other is where a lot of our problems come into play. And so a shared understanding is really, really important. And the more understanding you have, the less documentation you need, especially, predictive. But it doesn't mean you have no documentation. But you need whatever it takes to get to a shared understanding. So we were probably a few weeks into our project on the checkout stuff, and our lead designer, I was talking about A/B testing, and at some point, he was asking a question. I realized that he thought when I was talking about A/B testing, that I was talking about doing A/B testing in usability studies, where I would have one experience for one person and then one for the other person, and the next participant have a different one. And that just kind of blew my mind, because I would never think of A/B testing that way. I would think of A/B testing as quantitative, needing enough data to be statistically significant, and you certainly wouldn't have that with parties of one, right? So it just blew my mind, right? But he was on a different wavelength. He hadn't spent 4 years at Netflix like I had, where it was just drilled into me, right? And so everybody comes from a different perspective. It's not one person's smarter than another or anything like that. Just we have different perspectives, different terminology. We may even call the same thing different things. So I realized that, you know, we'd been going along this path talking about A/B testing for weeks, and he actually didn't know what I meant by that, but I assumed he did. So this is where that shared understanding is really, really important, and something that we kind of take for granted. The other is a really deep collaboration, and it's built upon trust. And so one of the things that kills a team is that if we actually don't trust each other, or we don't respect each other's skills. But the thing is that, you know, there's a secret ingredient that I'll talk about in the next step. I won't give it away now, but that really creates this. But there's a strong belief that ideas come from different voices. And as a manager or a leader, you know, if you're in that role, you know, lead, or you will be in some day in the future, one of the things you want to do is, you know, not squash any voices. You want to be able to pull all the voices together. And trust is part of that. Now, what happens though is that it's easy for any of us to kind of go off on our own and go kind of dark and come up with our own ideas. And anyway, we're not tied and tethered to collaboration, is where we start straying. And so being able to come back to the team as early and often as possible, share what we're learning and what we're experimenting, what we're trying, the better it is. And I'll tell you also this afternoon when I go through anti-patterns, there's a lot of examples when I turn this on the opposite side. So we'll have more discussion of this too. But the real key is this continuous customer feedback, and I've said this in different ways this morning already, but this is really, you know, the lifeblood of the team. And if you think about like a swamp, you know, there's no water coming in, it's just sitting there getting stagnant. And that's what a lot of teams look like. They're getting no customer data. And you know, when I was, you know, younger in my career, and I remember being at one company, was at American Airlines, and I was told, you know, so our customer was the forecasting group, and they were just around, they were on the same floor, around the corner. I said, well, I need to talk to them. Well, they're really busy. And so, you know, I wasn't bold enough at the time to say, well, I don't care if they're busy. If I want to build a product for them, I need to talk to them, right? I would have never said that at that point. And now in my career, I would have said, I'm talking to them, you know, I'm gonna get on their calendar. But I was too timid, and you know, back then, and also I just thought the people above me knew what they were talking about, which a lot of times they don't. They just have whatever reason they're saying what they're saying, you know. So, and I remember another time where I was in a company, and so what I ended up doing there was eventually, and it took a while, I eventually just said, okay, I'm gonna go over and sit with them, you know. So I went and sat with them and watched what they did, and I said, hey, you know, I've got some ideas, you know, and so I had some, you know, I was using at the time FrameMaker, which was an easy way to sort of mock stuff up, and I showed them, and I could sit there and change it on the fly with them, you know, the UI mocks, and they became like ecstatic, you know, like they were an owner of the thing. So I started getting feedback from them right away, and all of a sudden we could start building a product. Same thing happened at another company where we were building same-day shipping services. Eventually became part of UPS and their same-day logistics service, but it was in Dallas. And so on the floor below us, we were in a loft in a cool part of Dallas in Deep Ellum startup, and downstairs was all the call center folks. So I got there and I started talking to the team, and they were telling me, you know, well, that's how they work and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, has anybody, you know, so has anybody been down to sit with them? Well, no. So nobody had actually observed them. All this, you know, knowledge about how they worked was what the second floor said about the first floor. Says, okay, well, the next 2 days, I'm just going to sit down there and take notes, and they let me take pictures, and I did, and I was now the expert, you know, on how our customers worked and what they needed and what their problems were. I listened to them on the phone, you know, and trying to, you know, contact courier services, because we, you know, ship things like, you know, it could be cord blood, you know, stuff like that. It could, you know, could be, you know, medical supplies, where, because they had to get there in 2 hours or 4 hours, you know, kind of critical shipping, you know, and you had to get on a plane and all those sort of things like that. So I was able to create some really nice visualizations that showed the workflow, you know, based on that. So this you know, it's hard because if you're not like the person who's, you know, has that job or whatever, and you're in a company that doesn't really understand that function, you just sort of have to take it, you know, the bull by the horns and do it. And you don't have to do it even perfectly. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I just went and took notes, right? And just doing that's better than not doing anything. In my early career, I used to read these books on UX and design, you know, and UX practices, especially in the 90s. And they had all these, you know, steps and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like thinking that this is exactly what you had to do. And they're just somebody who took some ideas and life experiences and put them into a little recipe. But the recipe is just made up. It's like, you know, you just, something good happens when you start talking to customers, even if it's just like totally crappily done, you know? So don't be afraid that you don't know how to do it. I mean, I've done like, you know, usability studies at Starbucks and put the stuff on Craigslist and got participants and give them gift certificates and, you know, and just spend all day at a Starbucks in Mountain View, right? And learned a tremendous amount about the product, you know, just by doing something like that. So continuous customer feedback, and I'll make this point back here again, turns a team outside in, which I think is really important. It's focused out the customer back in instead of inside out. In fact, my oldest son, when he was little, he used to say he's going to turn his shirt outside in, you know, to do it right. So he had it kind of backwards a way to say it, but it's actually the correct way to do a team.